We are not waiting for anybody because time waits for no one. So we are going to start because there's no time on our side. So we are going to start immediately so that we can maximally maximize our 2 hours, because it's been a while and then we have no time. So we have to manage our time very well at this point. So for those of us that have been regular, we don't need much introduction. I still our honorable, distinguished sociologist, Alaku Emeka, who is taking us the research method. And today you can see how punctual he is today, because I have been hammering him. I've been giving him a sleepless night. That is why you see he's here now. And so let's try as much as possible to get whatever we can get. And like you know, the recorded will still be available. So if you are not in position to write anything, don't worry, just listen carefully so that when you start listening next time, it will not be the first time. So your comprehensive rate will be higher. Thank you so much. At this point, we want to mute everybody because of background noise and those that will be coming in with noise, so that we will not be interrupted. At the end of the day, or at any point that he wants interactive section, I will also do the same thing. I'll mute everybody to flow around. So, sir, you can unmute yourself now and take the stage. God bless you, sir.
All right, good evening, everyone. Hope we're having a nice weekend and a nice Sunday. It's good to be back with us again. However, the focal person said maximize our 2 hours. Bearing some challenges, we might not even get up to 2 hours, but I want to assure that within the next 45 minutes, we'll get something tangible. That is because of power issues and the likes that are beyond our own capacities for now. So, but we're going to utilize a tangible time that we have and that our capacity can offer. So, welcome on board. Research method will be very, very fast, faster than we have always been. Not just because of the power issues, but because a lot we are lagging behind and a lot need to be covered. I want to hope that with the pace at which I'm going to be fast, I still hope that our um, assimilation process will also be as fast. Right. So we're talking about qualitative data the last time. Sorry, qualitative research. I want to believe that we had maximum understanding in the last class, and so we might not need to do a refresher. However, we'll proceed. Let me do a recap to say that qualitative research are those forms of researches where the researcher is most interested in collecting data that are of textual values. They are more or less research types that are textual and not quantitative. They are textual in nature. One of the major difference between qualitative data and other types of data is in its data analysis. Generally, for every form of research type, data analysis differs. For those of us who might be very well interested in qualitative form of research, note that qualitative research types often utilize a more complex process. Why quantitative data analysis utilize simply statistical methods of data analysis in terms of averages, means, and other numerical data points. Qualitative data utilize more of textual analysis, but in this regard, in qualitative research, data sets are often analyzed using um, focus group data. We also use coding We do simply tabulations, what we call descriptive statistics, and then textual analysis. Sometimes we can then involve what is called graphical representations of these values for analysis. So qualitative data analysis is, it looks to students as simpler, but it's more complex. That is because the data sets would have been qualitative enough to be classified into a qualitative data, and then they must be grouped eventually. Then they must be coded. Then before you begin to tabulate and then do your frequency distribution and analysis, and then giving requisite responses in terms of, sometimes apart from analyzing content of a table, in qualitative data we do what we call verbal analysis, where you give a direct quotation of what the other or what the respondents have said, and then you are going to now draw a correlation. Sometimes in like postgraduate studies now, we do not, or the department do not accept a single or a singular form of instrument for data collection. So oftentimes we tend to collect both qualitative and quantitative data. So the department itself has moved into a mixed method research type. We'll get to that point. But however, when you do mixed method research type, it means that you are going to be combining qualitative and quantitative data, which is what mixed method is. Your analysis, your forms of data to be collected will be both qualitative and quantitative. And thereafter, your analysis will also have to follow both qualitative and quantitative data analysis. It means that you would have to be doing tabulation of frequency distribution, textual analysis, and then eventually statistical techniques. So that is for maybe those of us who will be raising hypotheses. It is essential. If you're not raising hypotheses, then you might not be doing the chi-squares, the Spearman rule, the Pearson correlation coefficient. If you are not raising hypothesis, then you bring in the mean score and the gammas and the rest of it to do your data analysis. So qualitative data are textual, or forms of research are those forms of research where the researcher is interested in textual or uh, uh, it's interested in textual responses. They are gotten through oftentimes uh, focus group discussions, observations, and the rest of them. So in the last class, we were supposed to talk about observation, I think, as one of the types of qualitative data. I said observation as a type of qualitative data is a type or form of research method where the researcher collects data by watching closely with keen interest on the phenomenon under study, where the researcher watches closely with keen interest on the phenomenon under study. Now, observation can be of two categories: participant observation and non-participant observation. By participant observation, we mean that the researcher gets involved with the activities of the group of the subject of study or the phenomenon under study. Take, for instance, a researcher is trying to understand the nature and operation or modus operandi of a kidnapping gang, maybe along the Kaduna Abuja Express Road. A participant observer or a participant researcher would have to join hands with this group of kidnappers or criminals. You must have to belong to that group. The individual will be initiated. It is only on that basis that the researcher can have cogent, you can have only on that basis would the researcher have idea or information on covert behavior of that group. Covert behavior, by covert behavior, we mean those behaviors that are not seen, that are only observed or understood within the innate aspect of a group setting. So Only on that basis would the researcher get those sort of information. But due to the ethics of research, participant observation is less likely to be utilized. This is because ethically, a researcher must introduce him or herself to the group under study as a researcher who is interested in collecting data. And you know, if you introduce yourself to certain group of people, it will affect their dispositions or behavioral pattern. So that is a disadvantage of participant observation. Being known to the group would limit their behavioral activities. They might tend to pretend, or they might tend to even meet without the knowledge of the researcher. They might have another group outside the researcher's knowledge where they meet and time, where the researcher might not know what ensues within the inner caucus of that group. But however, if by virtue of skill set, the researcher can pull through being part of that group without their knowledge, that is one of the most authentic way a researcher can garner enough knowledge. Now, the second type of observation, which is the non-participant, it is in this case, the researcher does not belong to the group. The researcher keeps a distance away from the group and tend to observe the group. If I want to carry out a non-participant observatory research on your class rep, Mr. Paul, for instance, the participant observation say I will become a friend to him. I might come and live in his house. I might have to enroll for postgraduate school just to have a close nexus with him. On a non-participant observation, I do not have to have this close knit relationship with him. I could be coming to the school premises in University of Abuja where he is always around. I could go and rent a house close to where he is living. But to me, I'm doing all of this because I'm pursuing certain information capabilities. I want to gather certain knowledge. I want to get some data. But Mr. Paul will not be aware. That is non-participant observation. The advantage of this one is that the researcher can get enough data in that the the person under survey, sorry, under observation, the phenomenon under study will not be aware of the presence of the researcher, and so the disposition will be free and the person will live his life as it is supposed to be. But disadvantage aspect of this form is if peradventure the person eventually discovers that he's under investigation. Ethical, the ethical concern of research would have been breached, and then a harm can come upon the individual because the other person might perceive that he has been uh, his, 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 his security has been tampered with. So that is observation. The other form of qualitative data I want to talk about tonight is focus group discussion. What is focus group discussion? Focus group discussion, like name imply, is a discussion between a researcher, the research assistant, and the group of people or subject of study or population of study. A researcher and the population of study interact and discusses the issues under investigation. But focus will be placed primarily on the aim of the study. So technically, the researcher must be aware of issues that drift away from the concern of the study. That is why it is called focus group discussion. It's a group discussion that is focused on the aim of the research. The advantages of focus group discussion is that it allows the researcher to gather um, a lot of data. It gives the researcher the chance to gather a lot of data. In this case, through discussions, of course, several opinions would have been sampled, several ideas would have been garnered. But beyond just the responses of the individuals, there's what we call non-verbal communication. The researcher will have the chance to observe people's reaction to certain issues beyond their verbal communication, their facial expression, and other forms of interaction that are non-verbal. There are principles to conducting a focus group discussion. I'm going to list them. Please, it is essential you take down these principles. Probably Dr. Kari would have given us, but I want to also re-emphasize. Number one principle of a focus group discussion is that it must be held in sessions. It must be held in sessions. That's number one. Number two, the sessions must be within limited time frame so as not to exhaust discussants. The population of study under focus discussion are called discussants. So the sessions may not be too long. It can be within 45 minutes each for each session. Number three, the number of discussants per session must not be less than 6 and must not be more than 12. Discussants per session must not be less than 6 and must not be more than 12. That is, the people you will be discussing with at a particular time must not be less than 6 in number and must not be more than 12. This is in order to help the researcher have a requisite control of the group. Then number four, if I'm not mistaken, the seating arrangement must be in a semicircular form. In a semicircular form, where the discussants will be facing the researcher and his assistant on opposite directions. In a semicircular form, with discussants facing the researcher and his assistant on opposite direction. Another principle is that a focus group discussion, on a focus group discussion, the researcher must have a research assistant. The research assistant can help the researcher in carrying out other functions necessary in data collection. For instance, while the researcher is discussing and asking questions and observing the nonverbal communication, the research assistant will be the one taking notes. Or the research assistant could also be the person taking note of those nonverbal communication. So you see, while a researcher is discussing and is engaging the speakers or the discussants, it might be difficult for the researcher to take down these notes or take down or observe the nonverbal communication skills. Now, another principle of a focus group discussion is that recording through audio or visual means must be put in place. This is because vital points might be discussed that might not be gotten by note taking. So it is essential that audio or visual sounds of recording must be entailed. Another principle of focus group discussion is that the researcher must ensure that he and the assistant are very well conversant with the subject of study. This is to enable them not to be swayed away from the focus of the research by discussants. Maybe we're talking about the issues of bad governance. And for instance, you are asking respondents issues that relate with the President Muhammadu Buhari government and failures of the government. And then somebody is telling you about Christianity or religion or is which is not the focus of the research. Such research, in such focus group discussion, the researcher must be careful of such kind of discussants. So if you are not vast, some people can sway you into a discussion session that you might think is part of, but at the end of the day, it would affect the content of the research result. If you are talking about good governance, stay on the issues that relates to good governance and not to sway into religious sentiments, whatever, whatever. This is not our focus. Or maybe until we get to a point where we say, let us discuss how religion affects electoral outcome, for instance. Then we can begin to talk about the primordial factors associated with religion and ethnicity and the rest of them and how they play a part in electoral processes and the rest. But on governance, let us stick to the point. I'm giving you an example in this case to say the researcher must be conversant enough not to be swayed away from the focus. Another principle is that the researcher must take note of dominant speakers. There are certain people that can keep talking and talking and talking. They don't care how long they want to contribute. They have to keep contributing. Such group of people must be taken note of. Because if you don't take note of such and place them under control, you will find out that the result of the research might be dominated by one person's discussion. There are certain times in your class, I'm sure, where when questions are asked, there are certain persons that every day they must speak, they don't get tired, they have to respond. Every day they must answer. Those are dominant speakers. In focus group discussion, we have to be careful of such group of people, of such type of people. Else, your work will just be filled up, or the result will be filled up with one or two few persons' views because other persons would have taken the back seat because they have not been allowed to speak. That's focus group discussion. I hope this is well taken.
Excellently. You are doing it as if we recorded carry lectures. Exactly. Like the focus group discussions and all of them, exactly as he followed them step by step. That is how you are following it. So just ride on. Just ride on.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to fuse one more of the qualitative type of data, which is interview. Now, interview has two variant categories. We have what we call key informant interview, then we have in-depth interview. These two forms of interview differ in terms of typology, in terms of modus operandi, in terms of result orientation. However, I want to fuse them to discuss them as one. I'm going to leave that as an assignment to us because of our time. That will give you only the sharp difference between the two. The sharp difference between in-depth interview and key informant interview is that while a researcher spends more time exploring and digging deep in in-depth interview, the researcher does not go as deep in a key informant interview. I take that again. In-depth interview ensures that the researcher goes deeper than the periphery. While key informant interview, the researcher stays afloat, but the respondent must be a key member of that phenomenon or that subject or group or population of study. Take, for instance, you are doing a research on insecurity in Nigeria and you are not involving the police. You want to do an interview and you are interviewing vigilante people or you are interviewing um, um, say traditional rulers. When of course we should be interviewing the security agencies that are confronted on a daily basis with the issues and challenges of insecurity in Nigeria. So when you involve the security personnel, that is a key informant, a key informant. key informant. But the nature of the questions you are asking, if you begin to ask them questions that relate to probably the tactics, the strategies, which of course you know you might not get, but you just want to poke deeper, that is in depth. You spend more time, you are more elaborate. But the key informant interview, you tell them to give you the issues that are probably affecting their performances, factors affecting their morale, their motivation levels, factors that is affecting, that is creating the increasing rate of insecurity in Nigeria. This is these are peripheral, but of course you are getting a key information from a key informant, an information that you might not get on the street, that you might rely on newspaper or or media permutations, which might not be right, but from the key informant you get the authentic information. So that's the difference between the two. But however, interview as a research method of qualitative data is interactive sessions of verbal communication between a researcher and a respondent. Between a researcher and a respondent. Verbal communication and interaction. That is interview. Interview can be done in various ways. Interview can be done through telephone. Interview can be done on a face-to-face basis. But the basic thing is that for interview method to be adopted, the researcher is interested in getting authentic information from those that are directly affected by the subject of study. While analyzing data from an interview session, the researcher is expected to provide verbal responses in block quotations. The researcher is expected to, I take that again, present verbal responses of the respondent on block quotations. Interview helps us to get responses, certain forms of responses that we might not get from other forms of research. Take, for instance, if you issue out a questionnaire, questionnaire enables, a questionnaire is a quantitative data form. We'll get to that point. Questionnaire enables a respondent to answer freely. But you see, the researcher might not get to see the non-verbal communication of that respondent. Though for interview, the presence of the researcher can affect responses. Take, for instance, you are doing a study on rape victims, and you are faced with a rape victim, a male researcher and a female rape victim. And then you ask a question like, um, how did you feel while the rape was ongoing? This is a wrong form of questioning. But peradventure, the researcher comes to that point. That respondent might not provide the required response to that. Or the researcher asks, what part of your body did the rapist carry out the rape action? Was it an anal form or whatever? You see, these questions is to avail or to provide deeper knowledge and understanding. But you see, the victim might not be able to come up with responses because one, they might be ashamed. There are a lot of factors that could inhibit adequate responses to this. But imagine you giving a rape victim that a questionnaire and say, go aside and answer these things and bring back. They will be freer to respond because nobody, they're not seeing anybody's face. So, but you see, when you ask a question, for instance, and then the rape victim bursts into tears, a questionnaire will not record that tears, but the interview would record that the respondent, while answering the question, sobbed or had tears drop, which tells that there is a psychological effect of the experience of rape on the victim. Now you begin to do analysis from beyond what was answered on a piece of paper or what was said, but by the fact that you see the person, immediately you mention how do you feel now, owing that you were a victim of rape, and then the person just burst into tears. You know that there is still a recurrent emotional and psychological effect of that experience on that respondent, which will be taken down. So, interview, as much as it has its disadvantage of not allowing people to communicate effectively, depending on the subject of study, it avails the researcher to gather both verbal and non-verbal information. And it can also offer the researcher the chance and time to poke and go deeper in the case of an in-depth interview. It also has the advantage of you conducting the research without necessarily going to the place of study or to the subject of study. You can, through media devices, you can reach out to the person and conduct your interview. Like now, we're communicating. You don't know where I'm communicating to you from. Probably if there were internet, effective internet capacity, I could be talking to you from Sambisa or from Karanamura. And then probably there's somebody here who is in far away Lagos State, Nigeria, or Port Harcourt. You see the two extreme, and then we are communicating effectively. Because I don't want people to see my face. I'm doing the audio aspect. The video would have enabled you to see the exertions, the expressions of my face as I teach, which could also have helped you probably learn better. But however, we'll make up with that eventually. So these are the major forms of qualitative data that we have and that are utilized in research. I hope this has been well taken. Let me get quick responses from us. How far so far? Class rep, please let us have the chance. If there are observations, if there are questions, if there are contributions, let's do that quickly.
Okay, hands. I'm not seeing any hands up. Observation. Okay, Beatrice. Go ahead. Go ahead. Unmute yourself, Beatrice. Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Beatrice.
Yes, sir. While you are explaining the qualitative method of data analysis, so you say these are the major ones. So I want to know the ethnographic. Is it also an instrument of data collection? And if yes, is it qualitative or quantitative ethnographic?
Ethnography might not exactly be either qualitative or quantitative. That is because ethnographic study is a peculiar type of study that is gotten or that is conducted to get information on rural communities, cultural societies, linguistic activities, the forms of data that relates to linguistic, culture, tradition, community, evolution of societies are ethnographically done. But you see, the challenge here is while you are doing that study, because your focus is on cultural evolution, societal evolution, linguistic evolution, that form of research is an ethnographic research. But how do you now get information from the people? You might then utilize maybe observation, which will now tell you whether it's qualitative or quantitative. You might decide to do a survey and then distribute questionnaire, which is quantitative. So ethnography, for me, cannot exactly be placed within any Ethnography only explains the nature of research you are doing. If your research is focused on getting information on rural evolution, linguistic, cultural development, or evolutions of society, then you are doing an ethnographic research. Or how do you elicit information from respondents? Will now tell you whether you are going to be doing a qualitative or quantitative or mixed method.
Okay, and Nas, are you okay? If you are not okay, you can still raise your hand now. Okay, Blessing, Irene, unmute yourself. You mute yourself again. You mute yourself again, Blessing. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The explanation you gave, the examples you use was actually making me think of interview rather than in-depth. So my question is, one of the qualities of an in-depth interview, the person must be very, very knowledgeable concerning the subject matter, right? So can the in-depth interview, so can in-depth interview be conducted between two persons? That's number one question. And then secondly, your examples made it look as if in-depth interview can be conducted on the phone. Is it possible having a key person, having the full knowledge, but because of time and or unavailability, can the in-depth interview be conducted on phone? Just asking.
Yes, okay, let me respond to that too quickly. First of all, in-depth interview can be conducted between two persons, a researcher and a respondent, yes. If I have the chance to interview President Muhammadu Buhari, of course, I will not do key informant interview. I would ask him questions that have been bothering our mindset. I want to know whether it is true that there are cabals or not. I will go deep into trying to find out what are the challenges hindering his performance. He was held to high esteem. What happened? We will go back to 2015 and trace our journey down to 2021. We will go as deep as possible so it can be done. That's number one. Number two, of course, a telephone interview can be done in-depthly, but the challenge would be how resourceful is the researcher? What is the level of availability of fund for the researcher to be able to conduct a telephone interview? Can you be on the phone for 2 hours? Maybe you're going to use WhatsApp call that is less expensive. Of course, you can do an in-depth interview. In-depth interview is about the length of time and the deeper and the depth of knowledge you are trying to unveil. So you will spend time. If you want to do a telephone interview for in-depth, then fine, if you have the resources. But as a researcher in Africa, in Nigeria, what is your level of resourcefulness in conducting a research? I think that answers.
Okay, Blessings, you are not done, Noya, or mute again?
So it's okay. It's just that when they were taking us the course, the telephone aspect was explained in interview and not in in-depth interview. So, but with this one now, I'm clear.
All right. Thank you.
It's okay. Welcome. Next on the line is Dorcas. I think Dorcas, unmute yourself.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dorcas. Yes. Please go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Emeka, I have a question. You were making mention of research is expected to a researcher is expected to present verbal responses in what is it? Block whatever you said.
Block quotation. Block quotation.
Okay, block quotation. Yes. Please, can you elaborate?
You know what it means to indent? If you are giving if you are trying to analyze your data gotten from interview, it comes in a verbal form. Whatever the person has said, you have to present it on your result sheet. You're going to bring the direct response of the person on your result sheet, but that will be done in an indented form of a block quotation. Like you put it in quotation, blocked.
Okay.
I wish I'm doing a video. Don't worry. I will let's note this down. I'm going to take up a video class sometime soon. I will give you an example of that, how it is presented.
All right, thanks,
yes,
sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Taiwo, unmute yourself. We can't hear you, Taiwo. You are not talking, no. Is it network? We can't hear anything from you. Okay. Madam Ogun Molara, unmute yourself. You muted yourself again. Unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Emeka, my question is, in a situation whereby during interview, whereby the respondents, they give maybe like fake, untrue information, you understand?
Yeah.
And the researcher take the information and maybe use it to analyze his findings or to interpret or present his findings. Won't that have a direct or indirect effect on the findings of the researcher?
Of course, it will. This is one of the challenge of research in Africa. You know, there are certain times where even responses as little as demographic characteristics can be misleading. But the researcher will be unhelpful because that is the response he has gotten from his subjects of study. When you present as that, if those informations are wrong, of course, the research result becomes wrong. But then again, that is why it is essential for it's what we call in research. I've forgotten this word, but in psychology it is called introspection. Introspection is a long and detailed research in psychology. It takes more time. You can take a year and a year plus conducting a particular research. While you are doing that, there are certain changes that you observe. Respondents, for instance, or phenomena or subject of study might not be consistent in behavior. So over time, you get to be able to distill which was right and which was wrong. But if after the first survey and study, whatever response you were given, you will submit and provide your result as that. If they are wrong, of course, the result of the researcher will be wrong. But again, it tells that there is always the need for us to do more study. And that is why several studies are conducted over time regarding a particular issue, and then we'll do what we call, I will get that concept, where we pick out similarities of responses that tells whether a particular thing is true or not. Okay, I hope that is okay, Mrs. Omalara.
Okay, Taiwo, unmute yourself, please.
No, I've seen Taiwo's question. He sent a written question, and he's asking if content analysis is qualitative or quantitative. Content analysis is actually qualitative as well. It's a qualitative form of data analysis, of research or data, because you depend solely on the content of a population of study. Take, for instance, you want to carry out a research on insecurities in Nigeria. There are certain places you can't visit. You have to rely on content provided by newspapers, um, by other means, maybe manuscripts, journals, and the rest. So, analyzing the content, you will have to be telling us that Vanguard said this on this day, why this day reported it as this, as this. So, we can deduct that this is this, this is that. So we're interested in the content. So it is also qualitative.
Yeah.
Please, I'm going to beg us that this class is going to end now. I want to think that we have learned something tonight. It's unfortunate that um, I'm out of power for my system. It's running low, and I wouldn't want a truncation of the process. So please, I beg your pardon tonight to think that at least we have achieved something. The next class we're going to have, and they say research method, please be ready for a 3-hour stretch. We'll finish research the next time.
We are ready for 5 hours.
So that, and I'm good to go as well.
Okay, thank you so much. At least the lecture was quite interesting and informative. So we thank God. So since it's beyond your control, no Allah. So I will get the feedback from you on the next class.
Please, I will. Thank you very much. I do have a pleasure.
Yeah. Okay, class, please announcement. Some are complaining that possibly they have been removed. And you see, like the notice I published earlier, I emphasize on the need for us to sign up, to create, to make sure we register, ideally on our Zoom apps. Like from your apps on your phone, if you click, you open, you see a place to write your name fully. So when you write there, from your screen, from your apps, you are not going to be logging in with the name of your device again. Because you see, there are some that I want to boycott the process. So, and that is not good for any of us here. Because you know, this thing is that is a collective agreement that we need tutorials. So if we have agreed that we need, then we have to go for it. And then those that we're engaging, they're using so many devices that needs money. So if you are not following, let it be that you are not following. If you want to follow, you follow complete, so that nobody will feel cheated. And then those of us that are here that have paid, it's not as if we have too much money, but because we felt there is value and we need to pay for it, and then we have paid. So no, one person cannot pay and want to enjoy or want to be part of, it doesn't work like that. So if you have paid and for you not to be removed from any of the class, please make sure your name should appear, or immediately you enter, click participant and rename yourself. In the first 3 minutes, you can do that. So I think that is all. But if you have anything now, the place is free now. You can unmute yourself and talk. I've removed the compulsory this thing now, so anybody can unmute and say anything now.
Hello, Mr. Paul.
Yes.
Dorcas on the line.